The important piece that I think we're missing is the fact that we're not doing a good job communicating with others. We're not doing a good job communicating with our families, with other professionals, with our own professionals in our own field. We need to think about how we use language to make our points, how we use language and how we try to talk about what we want in a way that's going to have an impact on the learner. And that's what Skinner talked about in verbal behavior. He talked about the fact that in his definition was, the impact that our behavior has on the listeners, not just what we are saying, it's the impact that it has on the other person. And that's where I think it's 80% presentation and 20% science. It's probably a hyperbole, but I think it makes the point that we need to pay more attention to what and how we're saying it than the actual content. And this has been written about for, there's 5 articles between 91 and 95 by Bailey, Fox, Hineline, we're not the first people to think of it, and they've been saying it for years, and I feel like we're just missing the boat on that. And so, like the Dr. Hanleys and the Dr. Frimans who do an excellent job of packaging what we do in a way that connects to the audience. And I don't think it should be left to only like a small select few people who became good at this to be our messengers. Like every one of us has to be a messenger in our own right. And I think the way that we get there is practicing a little bit more humility. I think if you look up the definition of humility, it has something like 3 parts, and you're looking at self-awareness. So you have to know your own skills. You have to be open, right? So openness to learning from others. And then there's this like transcendence, or this being a part of something bigger, right? So understanding that you're part of, for us, it's like our culture, right? So understanding the bigger group that we're a part of. And if you can utilize those 3 things, understand your skill set, learn from others, and then give back to the community in a way that's meaningful for them, I think that that's going to allow us to have more meaningful communication, more meaningful trainings, more meaningful resources and things, even services, right? But it takes self-awareness. You have to recognize that it's not just what's in the white book. It's not just the task list, right? Like being the BCBA, getting your certification, and this is the bar, the bottom of the bar, right? Yeah. That's entry level. Like you just qualified.
Minimum competencies.
Yeah. You just hit the minimum requirement to be a professional in the field, right? And so now you have to do your due diligence to get your experience, right? And a lot of our ability to connect with others comes from our experience with how many people you get to work with on a regular basis. So putting yourself out there and really paying attention to the stuff that other people are saying and the families you work with, and that's where like the cultural humility piece comes in, and understanding that every family you work with is going to be different. Every clinician that you train or tech that you train has a different learning history. And once again, you have to be aware of your own skill set. You have to be open to learning from them. I tell all the clinicians I work with, all the staff that I've trained, I tell them feedback is a 2-way street, right? I need to know if I'm doing a good job training you. And the only way I'm gonna know that is if you're telling me that. And it's okay if you're telling me that I'm not doing a good job, because the learner's always right, the rat's always right, the learner's always right. And so if you're not learning the way that I'm teaching, I have to change that. And we need to do a better job of having a mindset like that, so that the people we are training and the people we are serving want us to be there, right? There's an article, I think it's Chadwell et al., 2019, they talks about how parents would rather work with clinicians who have better interpersonal skills than the best evidence-based practice. Right, and this goes right along with that 80% presentation, 20% science. It's not about the content of what's being delivered, it's the way it's being delivered. And they showed it in, with evidence, with data, that families would choose these clinicians who connected better with them. And this is not just in our field, this is pretty well known in psychology, in human services, right? Bedside manner, things of that nature, that people would rather work with, right? The most successful therapists or therapy and client relations are the ones where there's a connection. I stole that from Hillary, but I know that, and she's right? You want the people that you work with to want to work with you, right? And the only way we do that, we have to build trust, we have to be genuine, we have to be vulnerable, you have to put yourself out there. And be willing to say that you're wrong, be willing to ask parents and clinicians for their input. I regularly ask my techs, what do they, you're the ones working with this child. What are you experiencing, right? What do you think is the reason? What are you seeing? You're an extension of me in this situation, so then how do I take that back? How do I take information from the parents and say, yeah, sorry, our first attempt, we didn't get it, right? Maybe we got some progress, we plateaued, we recognize it early enough that we can switch it up, right? And a lot of clinicians don't feel comfortable admitting that, right? And then it turns into, go get the next recipe, or just waiting it out longer, or adding more arbitrary reinforcers, or whatever, throw in a DRO and throw in this and that, just to see if we can get behavior change when we're clearly missing something, right? We need to do a better job of just saying, okay, I missed it. I missed it on this one. Let me go back, let me get some more information, right? Let's do some analyses and see if we can adjust some things here. Look at the bigger picture. Behavior is a function of its context. That A is a lot bigger than one singular thing. And I saw that. I have to give credit where it's due. It was Jackie McDonald, I think, said that, right? Capital A for antecedent, because, Gold Diamond talks about all of the contextual variables, and that there's all different kinds, abstractional, instructional stimuli, all of these things. And that's something that's not really being taught. We're only taught to look at what happened right before the behavior. And we're just well, what about, not only, where is the setting? Who's in the room? What were they doing right before? What was the quality of the interaction beforehand? That's really important in the way that we're coming around. And I feel like all of these conferences nowadays we're starting to touch on it with compassionate care, with skill-based treatment, and assent-based, trauma-informed, trauma-assumed, interventions. We're getting there because in order to do those things, you have to have the skill sets that I'm talking about. In order to be really good and understand that skill-based treatment is a process, it's not a procedure, right? And you really have to learn, you have to be able to take it apart and put it back together, because it's still just a behavioral treatment package. That's just a combination of strategies. And then if you can learn to do that, learn to be reflective and take it trial by trial, and then recognize that it's not just gonna work, right? Yes, if you do it correctly, you have the right pieces, it'll work.
Someone's eager right now, they're sign me up, Ed. Where do they learn more? There's a lot here, right? Where do you start to point people to?
So many articles.
Mentors.
Yeah, I have a lit review for my master's students. It's 52 articles, right? I named a couple already. There's 5 just on how we use technical jargon and its negative impact on our abilities. I like conceptual papers, right? There's obviously single subject design, it's the core of what we do, but to really teach some of the clinicians new concepts, I love the papers like the Big Four, that they talk about behavioral cusps, and the ABA is a science and therefore progressive. That's the leaf it all. Dr. Friman's the TED Talk and paper that came out, right? Circumstances view, right? All those papers, Dr. Hanley's blog, right? It's a blog, but it's so impactful. I give it to parents, right? My newest kind of interest is interdisciplinary collaboration. And that, once again, that requires that humility, but being able to look at how do we best work with others, right? And now in the last probably 5 years, there's a slew of guides for compassionate tools for collaboration. There's a behavioral analytic. I think Slim et al. has a article on behavior analytic perspective on interdisciplinary collaboration, right? We're starting to get into these things. I call them the off-task list, right? You have your on-task list stuff, great, go learn those things. The off-task list stuff is what I consider how to be human and treat people like humans. They don't teach you that in your master's program. You got to get that somewhere else. And so I always send people to these conceptual papers because I'm not gonna be, like, if you can't learn Cooper, that's on you. I'll help you if you have questions, but I'm more concerned with like your ability to work with people. And so I'm gonna give you these other articles that kind of open your mind, hopefully, to looking beyond this, right? And looking at your value. I've been doing in-home services primarily. So I look at how they work with families. You have to go send these people into people's homes, right? And they can't just show up with a behavior plan and the treatment goals. There's a whole package involved in being able to go and connect with the family and get the family to buy into services and trust that what you're doing works and see that you care about the person.
You're literally entering one of their most personal spaces ever.
Yeah. You become, if you're there long enough, right, you become part of the family. It's like, it's not, no matter how, ethical you are, right, you are in their personal space, and so that's been a really cool thing to try to teach people, just to open it up, open their minds up so that they can pay attention to the big A, right? Pay attention to the context that you're in. You showing up changes the context, right? And you have to understand that as a piece of it. And it's not your right to just work with these people, right? Like just because I have a BCBA and you're insurance funded and I'm showing up, I'm that person, you still have to get buy-in. If you don't get the buy-in from people, you can have the best behavior plan in the world. If there's no buy-in from the tech or the family, it's not gonna matter.
If you had to thread a needle through all of what you shared today, like what's the take-home point for people here?
Try to learn how to take a step back. The work that we do puts us in a position to be tunnel visioned and to put things under a microscope. And as awesome as that is, if we always have our blinders on, we're gonna miss the bigger picture. We're gonna miss the effect we have on others. And it is a skill set that I've learned, and I've learned through my own experiences. That was the first feedback that I got at my first job as a tech. When I interviewed for a clinician position, my first feedback, they're like, here, dissect this program book. And I went through program by program, this one's not making progress. This one has a bad prompt hierarchy. And I literally, program by program, critiqued the whole thing. And then she was like, yeah, but like, are they even targeting the right things? And I didn't even think of like, who's the client? What are their goals? What are their aspirations? What does the family care about? I was looking at data points, and critiquing it, but I didn't look at is it even socially valid? Is what we're doing even matter? In this book, the answer was no, right? And I think that sparked this kind of trying to always sit back, listen, look at, is the energy you're putting into this right now working towards, right, like your values direction? Like, are you going in the way of your values? Are you having the intended outcome? Or are you going to if you continue doing this? And it's a skill set that I had to learn, and now I think I've gotten much better at it by active listening, taking a second, learning from others, putting myself out there. Consuming a lot of reading a lot, listening to every podcast I can find, right? Like it's an active process to do that. And I think that will help people open their eyes and try, start seeing that bigger picture, start allocating their responding, right, to different sources of reinforcement. Matching law. Tie that in. My name is Edward Sanabria. I am one of the directors of Functional Assessment and Treatment Implementation at Centria, where we are rolling out the largest, to my knowledge, transition to skill-based treatment and compassionate care for kids across 13 or more states, 350 clinicians, and we're trying to have a really big impact on the field and the people that we work with.